Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come back before you again. This is one of my most favorite topics. So when Scotty did the invitation, he said, I want you to come and talk about the Community Police Ambassador Program. And I said, wow, that's great. That's going to be a really awesome time. And, I will tell you, back in 2016, when all of us here in this community sort of found ourselves at a really unprecedented place, and we were trying to figure out kind of what our new normal was going to be. Of course, that was right after the shooting of, killing of Alton Sterling, and the police officers, the ambush on the police officers, and then of course the flood. 2016 was a year that none of us, of course, will ever forget. And it was also during that time that our council had gone through kind of an interesting time. One council meeting, we found ourselves sort of with an array of policy recommendations for the police department that none of us had really had an opportunity to see or review or absorb, and had conversations with the community about. And I'll never forget, that was one of the most painful council meetings we had to sit through, because we literally had to watch one by one each one of those recommendations. Some of them that weren't, that were actually pretty good recommendations, but because of the lack of communication and involvement, we had to watch each one of those items die. And so with that, one of my colleagues and I, Trey Walsh, got together and we kind of looked at each other and said, we need to be able to do something. This is one of the reasons why people elect us to actually lead and help make sure that the community that both of us have grown up in, have grown to love, becomes back that community that we both are proud of. And so with that, we had no idea what we were going to do. We just wanted people to talk. We knew that we had a really good relationship that crossed the differences in our race, the differences in any other, our ages, education, where we lived. We just liked each other as people. And we wanted so badly for that kind of love and respect and understanding to be able to transcend throughout our community. Our children are the same age, two of our kids, and they had an opportunity to play together, and it was a moment that kind of changed Trey and I forever, and we became very, very close friends, and so did our children. And so with that, we decided to just pull people together. Historically, we had worked on a police planning committee that sort of looked at the police department and some of the policies, and we had done that several years prior. We decided to pull together a group of individuals and come together just to have conversation, talk about recommendations, things and ways that we may be able to improve relationships between the police department and our community. And so with that, we pulled together sort of an array of individuals from all over the community. And we met at the 19th JDC for several weeks, and we met really every week. And we just came together, and initially we said, well, let's talk about what needs to be improved. Where are the issues? What are the problems that we're having? And we recognized that people at that moment weren't really ready to have that conversation. They wanted to just have a community conversation about where we were. So we took several meetings, and we just allowed the community to exhale. And we talked about everything. We talked about what we liked, what we didn't like, things that were good, things that were bad, and we just let the community sort of exhale. And as a result, right in the middle of us having those conversations, the flood happened. That was a very unique time because while we were so divided as a community, the flood sort of miraculously brought everybody back together. And so we, of course, postponed the meetings, letting everybody get back to sort of a state of new normalcy. And I got a phone call from Hillamore, District Attorney Hillamore, and he said, Tara, he said, the meetings that we've been having are way too important for us not to continue. He said, I know that we're going through a lot, people are trying to recover. He said, but this is important work and we need to finish. And so with that, we called another meeting. We had anticipated that by December, we would, the committee would sunset, we'd have all these recommendations, and we were gonna be good. That time period lasted over a year and a half. Individuals in the community said, we want to get together. We're not interested in moving really fast. We want a quality of work, and we want this to be something that is meaningful to our community. So we met for that time. During that time, we actually had 2 meetings at the River Center, where we very methodically and strategically opened it up to the entire Baton Rouge, the entire parish. And we allowed individuals to come in and tell us everything that they thought and felt about our police department, what was going well, what was not, ways that we can improve. And as a result of that, we sat there and literally verbatim took down everybody's idea in that room. From that meeting, we came back together. We allowed BRCC, Southern University, and LSU came to the table and said, well, look, we can do the academic part. We can go and do all the research. We can find best practices across the country, and we'll pull together what's being done based on what the community has said they wanted to see. And they did that, and as a result of the work from the information from the community and the work of those 3 institutions, we were able to present to the community, to the administration, to the Baton Rouge Police Department, the Baton Rouge Community Police Policy Review Policy Recommendation Paper. And so this is that document. This document has been out there now. Everyone has a copy of it. And it has all of the recommendations that came from the community, as well as all of the backdrop research, all the research that was done by those 3 institutions, and all the recommendations were here. One of the recommendations in particular that I'm very proud of, and I'm actually here to talk about today, was the Community Police Ambassador Program. That was a program that was actually found by Southern University from London, way in London, and we all thought we were going to take this fascinating trip to go see their program. But Southern found this amazing program that was a Community Police Ambassadors. And we spent hours having conversation about that particular program, how we can implement that here, why was it needed. And we really felt that that was the best vehicle to open the lines of communication with community and the police, and also allow for there to be something substantive to happen as a result of those conversations. And so we formed a committee that ended up being sort of standing room only from time to time, because we didn't want it to be sort of these hand-picked folk. We wanted it to be very pure, very organic, and allow everybody that wanted to have input into this process to do so, because it was so important to everyone involved. And so we also talked about the selection process. And we said, okay, well, we're gonna let the elected officials select, or we're gonna let the community select. And we made a decision as a community that we would allow it to be a self-selected process, that individuals that wanted to apply could apply to be a community police ambassador. There were a few things that they had to do, however. Number one, they had to be at least 18 years or older. At that time, they also had to reside within the city of Baton Rouge, and I'll press pause for a moment there. We, since that time, have expanded it. We started with the boundaries of the city of Baton Rouge because we wanted it to be a model program. A lot of the issues that we had were relative to the Baton Rouge Police Department, and we started there. Always with the intent, if things went really well, to expand it and include the entire parish. In addition to that, they had to commit to a 2-year commitment, because the program was a 2-year process, and they also had to commit to 8 sessions of training. And as long as they were able to do that, and they also had to have a connection with their community and be willing to be that representative. And if they meet that criteria, in addition to being able to pass a background check, one of the things that they wanted to make sure of was that individuals did not have any pending criminal issues with the police department that could maybe be a conflict with the conversations that were going to be in the room. They also wanted to make sure that individuals that may have had prior interactions with the police department or prior issues with the police department were not able to be at the table. And so they wanted it to be very open, very transparent, and allow individuals that may have even not had a really good relationship with the police department in the past to still be at that table, to make sure that those voices as well were heard. So this definitely was not a sort of everybody loves the police come in or everybody hates the police come in. It was a real good balance and mixture of individuals that had real relative issues and conversations about how they wanted us as a community to address those relationships. So we started out with class 1, about 23 people. applied and were able to pass the background check, commit to the training, and we started on that process. I will tell you that that entire time was something that I did not anticipate to be the way that it was. But I was very, very happy that it ended up the way that it was. And I say that to say that we walked in that room not knowing what those conversations was going to be like. I see one of my colleagues here, former Councilwoman Barbara Freiberg, now State Representative Barbara Freiberg, who, when she came on the council, this program was already running and came to every meeting and was really part of those conversations. When we walked into that room and the dialogue between the individuals in that room, one of the things, and I remember the advocate reported this, it was interesting because they were supposed to be representatives and the bridge to the community as it relates to the police department. In one meeting in particular, they came in and we recognized that within that room, there were issues among each other in that room. And so we said, hey, this is a conversation that has to start here before this conversation ever happens outside of this room. And so we slowed the process down and allowed the community within that room to have some real dialogue about their own issues. Why, when we call the police in our department, in our neighborhood, they don't come as quickly as they come in your neighborhood? Why, when the police come in our community, they treat us a certain way versus how they treat you guys? And so that was a real conversation. And it transcended race, it transcended education, it transcended background, and it was just real and it was very transparent. And so for me and for many others, it became this unusual, unexpected healing process that allowed those individuals in that room to look at their relationship with each other as a community, as well as their relationship with the police department in a totally different perspective. I'll give you one story. There was a gentleman who was a pastor. Wonderful, wonderful man, and he was part of the initial class. And he walked in there, and I can really say this almost kind of with a chip on his shoulder about the police department. And in his view, very justifiable, because when he was young and they had the riots down on North Boulevard, young soldier coming from the Army, he just sort of went down there. He came from visiting his girlfriend. He was going down there to sort of see what was going on. And all of a sudden, he found himself on the ground with a gun pointed in his face, was subsequently arrested and beaten. And he was still, after all of those years, holding that pain from the past. In every meeting, I could almost tell you the story. I don't know if I was even born, WT, but I could tell you the story as if I was standing there. It was so real. And when we started having conversations about police pay and training and retention and compensation and all of that, there were a lot of people in the room that said, how can we give the police officers a raise if we can't get the right treatment that we want? And we would go back to history, and all that dialogue came to bear. And he was not one of the proponents initially of the police pay. And it was basically because of his experiences. So we took some time, we talked about civil service, we talked about the reason why we could not get rid of bad officers as quickly as everybody thought that we could. Why can't you just walk in there and fire a bad officer? If you know he's bad, just fire him. And so we had a lot of conversation about the civil service system and sort of the process that officers and administration have to go through, even to, once an officer is identified as having issues, what they have to deal with. We talked about the mental issues as it relates to the stress and the trauma that not only the community is facing, but that our officers are facing. We talked about the high divorce rates and just made that whole process very human. And I can tell you now, if you meet this gentleman, he is one of the largest supporters. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth when we're at the meeting, we've got to give our police officers a raise. They need a raise. But it was through this entire 2-year process that took that amount of time to sit, to listen to one another. I heard a story that says, I never met someone I didn't like once I heard their story. And we slowed that process down long enough to allow the community to hear each other's story. One of the things that we were very, very proud about was the fact that transparency was a major issue, and looking at the police and how transparent those relationships were. Several of the things that came out was the community police ambassador suggested the Baton Rouge Police Department had a survey, and they wanted to get the survey out to everyone and make sure that people were able to say how they felt about the Baton Rouge Police Department, give ideas. And the Baton Rouge Police Department allowed the ambassadors to literally comb through that entire survey, make recommendations, make amendment changes, give suggestions on how that survey needed to go out. And so that document that you see, that's that survey that the Baton Rouge Police Department had, that's a document that was made in conjunction with the community police ambassadors, and they did that. One of the other things that came out was the creation of one of my pride and joys, which is a Community Connection Center. A long time ago in New Orleans, there was a program called Weed and Seed. It was through the Department of Justice. And this was way back in the 90s. And in communities, urban communities especially, a lot of times people are not as comfortable walking into a police department as they would somewhere in their neighborhood. Even if they want to give information, they just weren't comfortable and hadn't had that relationship. And so they would take blighted storefronts in communities, and they would allow police officers to outfit those buildings and have a space right there in the neighborhood where the community could come and give information and really have a good relationship with the police department. And so the organization decided that, or the group decided that that was something they wanted to do. And so we actually cut the ribbon on the first Community Police Ambassador program last year. We were very excited. It's in South Baton Rouge. Wonderful partnership with the Housing Authority, the Baton Rouge Police Department, Louisiana Public Broadcast, Urban Specialists out of New Orleans, the South Baton Rouge Economic Redevelopment Group. And so they actually have a space now right there on Thomas Delpit and they're getting ready to have their open house, where individuals from the community are able to come in. And I will never forget, the chief said this over and over. He said, I want a place where they can come in and give a report when something bad happens, but I also want to have a place that they can come in and give a good report when a police officer does something really good. And so they're outfitting the facility with kiosks where they're able to come in, not only give reports, but do 311 requests and actually have that community connection. We will have a second one that we're working with the Louisiana Housing Corps that will be located at Mid-City Gardens, right across the Trevor Sims Bridge overpass at Mid-City Gardens. And then there will be another one that's in Scotlandville that we're doing in conjunction with ExxonMobil. So that's another one of the things that we were very, very proud of that came out of the Community Police Ambassadors Program. Another thing, remember I told you guys that we had that meeting where we recognized that there was some healing that needed to take place within the department, within the organization, before they can go out into the community. So what we did was that the meetings would get very, very detailed, very long, very transparent. We recognized that we needed sort of an outshoot to be able to have those very comfortable, very transparent conversations that may have not been part of their regular meetings. And so we created something called What Color is Love? Race Talk. And we had a series of meetings where all the gloves were taken off, no egos, no logos, and we just sat in the room and we had real talk about race in this community. So we talked about everything from race and education to race and social environment, race and politics. We had a session on race and religion. Now I will tell you, those were not very easy and very comfortable conversations. We did role play. Where we had one group talking about Alton Sterling. It was a white family pretending they were sitting around the table. Because a lot of times we were saying that we have conversations in private about issues that are public issues that you never hear, and we never have those conversations with each other. And so we did role play, and we did the other one about the NFL players not standing up for the national anthem. And we had the group of black men that were pretending they were in the barbershop, and they were having that barbershop talk. And then we had the family over here having conversation at the dinner table. And we put them in what's called a fishbowl. And so no one from the audience could say anything about the conversation that was going on there. And I tell you, that was difficult because the audience, you could see people's faces turning red because they so badly wanted to give input on what was being said in that conversation. But the reality is that those are real conversations that are being had behind closed doors, and now we're bringing them to the forefront so that we can have that discussion, as uncomfortable as it is, but that our community can heal. And so we did probably about 12 race talks. We met once a month, and those were phenomenal. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, and there's many, many more, and so there's a list that we have of all the different accomplishments that the community police ambassadors were involved in. But one thing I'm very happy about, in addition to that, is the recreation of the Explorer program. This program was a program that many, many years ago, a long time ago, as a matter of fact, the police department had the Explorer program where they would introduce young people to the possibility of serving their community as an officer. And so the Explore program really gave them an opportunity to explore sort of what does it mean to be a police officer, what do they do on a day-to-day basis, what kind of stress and trauma do they go through. And these young people were actually able to go out on calls, find out about how the police department communicates with the community. And the Baton Rouge Police Department heard that recommendation from the community police ambassadors, and they reestablished that program. And so I'm very proud of that program because in February, that group of young people will actually be graduating. The first class will be graduating. So those are just some of the successes that the community police ambassador program has had. Someone asked me not long ago, what's the matrix? You know, how do you know if the community police ambassador program has been successful? And I will tell you that some of it is tangible and some of it is very intangible. Some of it we can look at this book and say, okay, this is what the community said they wanted to see, and point, we've accomplished that. Some of those things that are very intangible are the conversations that people ordinarily would never have that now you're having. The transition from the gentleman that I mentioned to you in the room that couldn't stand the police riding or walking and really didn't want him in his neighborhood, and now he sits with them and they come to his house and he invites them in for coffee and they're having conversation, and he goes to the police department and they know him and he knows them. And so those are those kind of intangibles that we unknowingly created as a result of just saying, hey, let's hear each other's story and let's talk. We now have Class 2. Class 2 had their very first meeting, which was supposed to be an orientation, and it quickly evolved into a working meeting where I think they now have one of their first items that they're going to deal with. Class 2 will be presented before the Metro Council at our next council meeting here in February. They're now getting ready for their training and will be doing their own strategic plan. And they've already identified things that Class 1 in their 2-year time period, just because it was a lot, had not identified. One issue in particular is the relationship between the police department and the community that's hearing impaired. And that was something that just did not rise to the top, but one of the ambassadors has a child that has a hearing impairment, and the concern is when he was approached by the police didn't know. They were giving him commands and instructions, but they had no idea that he was hearing impaired. And so, you know, one question was asked, is there a universal sign that you can say, hey, I'm deaf, I can't hear you? And so those are the kinds of policies now that that I think is probably going to be one of the first things that Class 2 is probably going to deal with and address. So I'm very, very proud of the work that has been done. This group now will be meeting at the training center. Class 1 met at BRCC. So when you talk about measure of success, Class 1 said, no, we don't want to meet at the police department because of the reputation, the impression. We want this to be in the community. And Class 2 said, yeah, we'd like to meet at the police department and the training center. And that, to me, was another one of those intangible successes. And we just asked the question, these are the options of where you want to meet. Do you want to meet there? And that progress said, we have a relationship with the police department. We're okay with meeting there. I do want to acknowledge one of our first class members, Miss Mary Jane Marcantel, who was part of Class 1. She was there from the beginning. In addition to that, Mary Jane was part of the advisory group that actually helped put together this document. and was part of the process from the very, very beginning. So Mary Jane knows about as much about this process as I do, and I want to publicly thank Mary Jane because she's been there every step of the way and was there the other night for Class 2 as well. With that, I think I'm going to stop at this moment and entertain any questions that anyone would have. Y'all are so quiet. Yes, Blake.
I want to ask if you're planning on challenging the mayor in the fall.
Wow. Can I get some water? Can I get some water? No, and I really just need water, not because of your question, Blake. My husband said.
Would you repeat the question?
Oh, repeat the question. So the question was, do I have plans to challenge the mayor in the fall? And I will tell you, Blake, I've been asked that question probably 100 million times. And at this juncture, my political, everyone knows that sort of I'm term limited. This is my last term on the council. We've done a ton of work. It was very, very important to me, even in the last race, that I like to complete things. And so there was a lot that we had to complete for District 10. I'm focusing a lot of my efforts and my attention right now on making sure that the things that we have planned, that we have not had an opportunity to accomplish, that we leave a real legacy, that whoever's in that District 10 seat can pick the baton up and continue to run. In terms of my political aspirations, I have a family that we're having conversations about what that's going to look like, and I will tell you publicly right now, we're not having any public conversations about my future political aspirations, but we will have that conversation pretty soon. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'll get back on the subject. First of all, I want to commend you, and those are a lot of exciting things going on. Thank you for your efforts in that. What is your gauge of the morale of the employees of BRPD? Because in any workplace, if morale is low, we've got problems.
Right. I think the question was, what do I think is the current morale of the police department? Because in any agency, the morale of an agency is meaningful and very significant. And I will tell you this, I have had a very unique opportunity, probably because I also, Scotty mentioned in my bio, I was a former chief administrative officer in the mayor's office previously under Mayor Bobby Simpson. So I have a lot of long-standing relationships with a lot of individuals. And I've had the opportunity to have a very unique relationship with the police department. I recognize that there are some factions and there's some divisions. My husband's a former police officer. So I think that I speak a lot of times to officers in a way that most people may not recognize. I was a wife of a police officer, so I get the trauma, I get the frustrations that they go through, and I have a sympathy for that and a clear understanding. I've had conversations with police officers that have said, we're really in a good place. We have an opportunity to make some progress and move forward. And I have other police officers that said, I'm very unsure about this. And unfortunately, we've lost some officers. I've had some officers that, and not necessarily because of morale, but it could be a mixed bag. I've had some officers that have said, I can go literally and work at Cox Communication and make more than I make at the police department. And with the stress and the trauma that our officers go through and the mental anguish that they have to do on a daily, my husband would tell me, he said, Tara, you have no idea how many times I would drive up to the house and I would call you before I came in. He said, but I literally had to sit in the car and just allow myself to digress and move from moving at 100 miles an hour to now having to come in and figure out how to be daddy and how to be husband. That's a lifestyle that most average citizens never recognize that our police officers go through. And so I think that mixed with the compensation issue and the fact that we've been a training ground for other agencies has caused major frustration with many of our officers. And so my hope is that we recognize that was one of the recommendations that came out of this policy paper, is let's look creatively at how we do compensate, not only just real money, but also what are the other options and things that people look for when they're looking for a good quality of life. And so it's a mixed bag, to be honest. And I'm hopeful, though, that we can move it to a place that Baton Rouge Police Department becomes a place that people want to come and work and not feel like they have to because they don't have any other options. Other questions? Yes, Eddie? Gary.
This might be a little bit unfair. I've worked with you.
Yes.
Under Mayor Bobby Simpson.
this is like a two-point question. I worked real close for 16 years, you know, answering public complaints and working with the police, neighborhood improvement, blight. Blight has been forever. We
Yes.
get ahead of ourselves, or we start to get ahead and start answering some of these complaints. Vacant lots, abandoned houses. You, Bob, when you was in the mayor's office yourself, you worked hand in hand hard on that. Even as a councilman, you started a committee, the Black Committee. How much progress do you think we're making in the blight? And because there's a lot of frustrating things, a lot of laws, and then come with the flood. It's not just in the inner city now, abandoned. It's all over the parish with these houses, abandoned houses, and
Right. So the question was asked, how much progress do I think that we've made in regards to blight elimination? Because there's a lot of work that's been done in the past, and there's still an issue. I will tell you this, and it's almost I'm not gonna say an unfair comment, but for me, Gary, you know me well enough that I'm totally transparent. I will tell you, I've gotten to a point where I'm almost tired of asking for permission, and I'm saying, let's just ask for some forgiveness and just get it done. And so today, literally, oddly enough, I released a press release, and I've partnered with a gentleman here and asking for volunteers to come out, because y'all know that we've been plagued with that recent rash of graffiti. It's everywhere. And so that puts people in the mindset, and even though it's not litter on the ground, that's literally visual litter. And so when people see it, it puts you in a mindset that we don't care, and it's dirty, and it's trashy. And so we're gonna go out and just clean it up, and paint buildings, and use this non-abrasive system to get it off. And I hope that we can get in touch with everybody whose building we're gonna go and clean up. And if not, I'm already officially asking for your forgiveness if we clean graffiti off of your building. And I'll answer it really like this. My issue is that if we don't pay attention to blight and make sure that you make it a priority, meaning not just in word, but also in deeds and action. It's kind of like our police department. If public safety and that's a real issue, then we need to have resources to follow that. And right now, our blight department, we don't have enough blight officers. 311 requests, we're 2 years in the hole. And so while I think there's some things that are moving, there's a ton of work that needs to be done. When you think about having to dig out of a 2-year hole, that's significant. And so we have to have additional resources, because if you don't, that little vacant lot that's over there, we did a policy paper based on blight, and you can look at the recommendations. There's some problems with our contract as well. But if you don't pay attention to that vacant lot, you might have some old tires that's there, right? Or you might have, then there's a mattress, and then there's an old TV, and then there's some concrete, and it just keeps piling up if nobody pays attention to it, and then all of a sudden you got a dead body. And so you can't separate blight from crime. We're taking old tires, and on February the 15th, Valentine's weekend, I want all y'all to come after y'all eat your chocolate. We're gonna do a Love Our City campaign, and we're gonna go and, in addition to the blight and the graffiti removal, at the end of the month, we are taking an old, overgrown lot right across the bridge where Trevor Sims Bridge is. We've gotten it cleared out, and we're gonna do a creative play space where we're gonna take old tires and put, and that's one of the recommendations that came out of the policy paper, and we're making a playground in conjunction with Shiloh Baptist. And so that's gonna be a playground to teach people how to reuse old tires. So it's a myriad of issues that we've gotta do, but it's
The second part of that question.
okay.
When I was in the mayor's office, Tom had and Bobby Simpson, they had Operation Takedown.
Mhm.
We called it different things. And like you said, it was all tied in with vacant lots, tires. The drug was going crazy.
Right.
Tom had and Mike Dickerson and all those in the police department, they used to ride. They couldn't get people to call when they seen something going wrong because they were scared.
Mm-hmm.
They would come back on it. So myself personally, we gave myself, my cell number, Mike Dickerson and a couple of other gave their cell number to the people and told them they didn't have to call
Right,
the hotline. They just had to call because they were scared.
right.
They would call and just
So
tell
what's
them.
the question?
That,
What's the question?
I'm gonna get to it. 1 second. I was on my answer.
So we got a little-
That's gonna be long.
a little
The question
timeline.
is, are they still doing that
Thank
with
you.
this?
Okay, so Operation Takedown, again, Operation Takedown is referenced in the blight policy as well as one of those programs that actually worked really well. I don't know about people giving their cell numbers and things of that sort. I do know that there's some cards that are given where they can call. People can call now, Crime Stoppers to make sure if they have tips that they can do. So I know that they are doing that. One of the things that we wanted to make sure is that people were aware of how to actually put in a service request and actually feel like they could get it done. That's one of the reasons why we have the Community Connection Center as well, because people will hopefully feel comfortable going there. I know there were some other questions, and I know we're on a tight timeline. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak more about Chief Murphy Paul, and how his performance has been and how he's contributed or supported efforts to help the community heal.
Sure. I know that Chief Paul, the question was, what's my comments about Chief Paul and his efforts and how supportive he's been in being able to initiate efforts to help the community heal. And I know that it seems like at every council meeting, there's a new grant that they've been able to get, supportive healing grant and other grants to make sure that there are at least resources out there to bring to the table to assure that the community has a place. I will tell you this, the Community Police Ambassador Program was a program that was actually started under Mayor Kip Holden's administration when he was in office, and they provided staff and was very, very supportive. Chief Dabney was very supportive as well. When it transcended over and Chief Paul took office, one of the first things we gave him was the policy book, and we said, hey, this is the voice of the community. We really have formed a really good working relationship with the police department and would like to continue that. He's been very, very supportive of this program. The officers have been at every last one of our Community Police Ambassador meetings. As a matter of fact, we were texting this morning about the meeting space for the Police Ambassador Program, and he said, sure, we'd love to have that program here. So we've had the benefit of having both administrations. We didn't miss a beat in terms of the support from the Baton Rouge Police Department. They've always been at the table. And Chief Paul, I think, recognizes that this is one of those tools in the toolbox that can make his job a whole lot easier. And so he was smart enough to say, that's one of the programs that we definitely want to highlight and make sure it's part of our community policing initiatives. Other questions? Yes, Coleman?
Two questions, if I could.
Okay.
The first one on the police department, does the police department coordinate with DPW in terms of lights, signs that are crooked or out or turned or missing from certain streets and stuff like on their night patrols and stuff? The street lights.
Okay, so the first question is, does the police officers coordinate with DPW in terms of lights and signs that are turned the wrong way and things of that sort? I don't know of any particular policy that's in place that has the police department reporting to DPW. I know that when lights are out, of course, that's another indicator and another opportunity for crimes of opportunity. So it would be within, so there are benefits to make sure that it is. I'm not sure, though, if there's a requirement that if there's a light out, that the police department actually reports that. I don't know. I think that would be something great as they're driving through and they're seeing that, because it'll make their job a lot easier, that we can create that opportunity, and that may be something this class 2 can take up as well.
And the second question would be having to do with the help that you gave us in getting the terrace exit installed. Our parish chamber started that, as you know, with you 5 years ago, and it was finished in October. Could you help us with the closure of Washington to complete that?
Okay, so the question was with the Terrace Street exit, it's now up and moving. DOT has completed that project, and the question was, can I help with East Washington exit and the closure of East Washington? I will tell you, I remember very distinctly when former President Barack Obama came to Baton Rouge, and he actually came to my district, and I was so honored to have the president in District 10, and he came to McKinley High School and spoke. But I also remember them taking him on that exit and having that conversation with President Obama that this is the most dangerous exit in the United States, and and having that conversation. And so, of course, when you get the president in that situation, I think the interstate was probably closed down when he came, but those of us that had to travel it on a day-to-day basis and took our lives in our own hands, it's an issue. And so DOTD and Congressman Graves and many others have said this is so important. I do know that it's tied into sort of that larger program of service for the entire interstate. I am closely following that. I get bits of information. Sometimes I get it early, Coleman, and sometimes I get it when the community gets it. But I'm making sure that I'm asking, please keep me aware and informed, because the closure of that or the repurposing of that is huge. And if we don't have the right community input and the right community information, that can be significant on the impact of that old South Baton Rouge community and that entire South Corridor. So I will tell you, I'm as much as I can at the table. I want to be able to support whatever's going to be best for making sure that people are safe, that we're traveling, and that when people come to our community, they can get around our community in a way that that is safe and that they love coming here and not feeling like they're going to die if they come and travel on our roads. And so that's important. I'm at the table, and I will be. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Last question.
What?
You said last question.
Oh, okay, yes. So you had mentioned that the program the ambassadors had looked at creative solutions on how to, get the police their pay raise and to increase retention. Could you give just a little more detail about some of what those solutions might be or what they did look at?
They did. They looked a lot at the information that came from the larger policy committee. One of the things that came out of the research was that our system was pretty antiquated as it relates to the opportunity to promote officers even within the ranks. And so one of the recommendations was definitely having a policy that would allow for and I forgot about this one. This was one that actually came to fruition. One was allowing for and this came from the Baton Rouge Police Union originally, where they came to one of our meetings and had a very robust conversation about the civil service system and sort of the problems within the system that prevented officers that are really good officers that are doing a good job to actually be promoted. And that was really very sad to all of us, that you can have an officer that does really, really well and meets all of the metrics and does a really great job. And then you have an officer over here that's kind of sitting back, not really caring, not doing a good job, but the promotion is the same. And so one of the things that they did talk about was giving the chief the opportunity to look at being able to hire those, I think it was deputy directors or deputy chiefs. The recommendation that came from the union for purposes of our meetings was 5. I think they ended up with 3. So that sort of allowed for just kind of an initial we're changing this process. We're trying to make sure that we're going outside of the norm and actually putting policies in place that will help. The other one was being able to be creative in incentivizing officers. We did have a conversation about the living within the city, and so one of the questions came up was, can we just figure out a way to reward officers that do live within the city? And so those are the things that they looked at. Some of those things have not come to fruition, but it is part of the policy recommendation, and we do anticipate that Class 2 will continue that conversation until our police officers are compensated in a way that they don't have to leave the Baton Rouge Police Department in order to make a good living.
And when exactly did those recommendations come out again?
These recommendations came out in May 24th of 2017. That was the initial recommendations, and then of course the other recommendations from the community police ambassadors in terms of what they've accomplished came out at the end of last year.